I saw this same common roadblocks in so many women. And it was these habits and conditioning, this programming of trying, to be good, to be a good mom, a good wife, a good friend, a good employee. And like it becomes our identity. And it starts becoming a barrier to our well-being. It starts really being one of the biggest hidden sources of stress that we are not talking about and we're not addressing.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today, I'm joined by my friend Kate Bartley, founder of She Walks in Wellness and a powerhouse in the world of holistic health and transformation. Kate is a master holistic health and life transformation coach, a physical therapist, a cancer survivor, a surgical menopause warrior, and a self-described recovering overgiver. She works with exhausted caregivers and service-driven professionals who feel like they've tried everything but still don't feel better, helping them reconnect with their own personalized path to wellness so they can finally feel like themselves again. Kate's journey of healing, both personally and professionally, led her to develop the Freedom Formula, a unique approach where emotional health opens the door for physical transformation. And now she's bringing that wisdom to the world through her new book, The Good Girl Prescription, which explores how deeply ingrained good girl syndrome keeps so many of us stuck in exhaustion, overgiving, and self-doubt. In our conversation, we dive into what good girl syndrome is, how it erodes self-trust, and the tools that Kate has discovered to help people break free from it. She also shares the personal challenges she faced while writing and releasing this book, because even when you teach this stuff, the old patterns can still show up. If you've ever felt trapped by perfectionism, people-pleasing, or the pressure to always be good, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. So, Kate, thank you for being here. It's so great to see you. We were just chit-chatting a little bit before I hit record, and I was saying we've known each other for a few years now, and I'm just so glad to know you and to have this opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me. I think Anna, you were one of the first people in the mind body space that I connected with. And I was like, oh my gosh, somebody that's passionate about the same stuff. Cause I live I live in Alabama, and it's really hard to find people to have these conversations with. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And I don't know, but most of the people I've met through this world, including you, very few of them live close to me. And even the ones who do live close to me, that's sort of more of a coincidence because we've all found each other online
Yeah.
because, yeah, it's like this interest and this life experience drew us together, which is really cool. Well, for folks who haven't known you for a few years or who may be meeting you for the first time through this podcast, could you share with the listeners what it is that you do and who you help?
Sure. So my name is Kate Bartley, and my background is a physical therapist, but I now call myself a life empowerment coach, also a mind body practitioner, but mainly my focus is on caregivers, women and care professionals that are in a place where they are really frustrated with their bodies. They're feeling stuck. Um, they've tried everything and nothing's working, and they're like either burnout or persistent emotional or physical symptoms. And like when we're a care professional and we hit where we don't have the capacity to do what we need to do anymore, we start looking for help. Like for the first time in our lives, we start going, okay, like I've got to do something. Something needs to change. And so that's the person that I'm usually working with. And we're really sometimes they're coming in the door of, emotional or physical symptoms, but usually that's not even what they talk about. Like their prep forms and what we're talking about is so much more. They're just, yeah, they don't they're feeling paralyzed, like in decisions, and they're just don't know which way to go. They feel trapped. And there's a lot of discontentment, if that makes sense. So we really get below the surface of the symptoms to find out what's the real issue, what's going on here. Why are we feeling trapped in our lives? Yeah.
Yeah. I think many listeners, even if they're not caregivers professionally, I think that they'll probably hear parts of themselves in what you just described and parts of their life experience. Um, and speaking of life experience, you and I both, our work is an expression of our life experience. Um, and I'd love for listeners to get to know a little bit about what life experiences have led you to this work that you do.
Yeah. Well, what I just described, that was me, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So, basically I hit that place where I couldn't function. I was in pain all the time. I had no energy. I had symptom after symptom. I'd lost my thyroid years before, and then I lost my ovaries. And just through all of the health challenges, I just got myself to a place where I finally was seeking other people for help. And I was going to every specialist out there, 3 different PTs,
Yeah.
losing faith in my profession and my
Which
identity
was what
crisis.
at that time? Your profession, like just to
I
set
was a
people
physical
up for the
therapist. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so I was part-time physical therapist. I was also in children's ministry in the church. So I was doing 2 jobs. And yeah, kids leaving home and just lots of family stress going on with life change and that kind of stuff. But really got to a place where like nothing's working, nothing's helping. And I finally, where things started to shift for me was I found myself just crying in church one morning, the worship team singing It's Well with My Soul. And I'm like, can't sing that. That is not okay with me. I am not okay. And something has got to change. And that's when I really started shifting my energy from trying to fix my body to listening to what was going on with my soul and going, what do I need and what needs to be different? So started to create space, step back from obligations and commitments and created space to journal. Like that was my first step, was like, I need space to write and process what I'm feeling. And so it was just lots of healing that started happening there. Yeah.
I don't know if some folks will be listening only for those who are seeing the video. You may have noticed my whole body like twitch like this when you said, I think you said I stopped trying to fix my body. And what, I don't know if you remember what the rest of it was
Yeah,
that you
like I
said.
started listening to the cries of my soul. Like
Yeah.
what is calling for attention? What needs to be different? What do I need? Like what's the request, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think every single human being, whether they've experienced chronic pain specifically or not, will identify with and relate to that, like that idea of just we're trying to fix ourselves, like viewing ourselves as a problem, and then reaching that point where I'm just running myself into the ground, trying to quote unquote fix myself and
Yeah.
treating myself as a problem. And there's something inside of me that's just desperate to be heard, and it's time to listen.
Yeah. And what I think realized about myself later and what I see in so many women is that there's this like old alarm of something's wrong with me that gets
Yeah.
activated. So it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't have to just be physical, it could be emotional, but we feel broken. We feel like we we just don't feel like the strong person that we always used to be. And we don't like that. That's really vulnerable. And I think it just triggers that old alarm of insecurity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go on a very small tangent for a moment.
Okay. Sorry if I took you there.
No, no, because what's coming to my mind is in my journey, particularly my journey of recovery from chronic pain, that was what led me to the point that you're describing as well. Like I've been trying to fix myself, whether it's physically or otherwise, my whole life. And there's something banging at the door trying to get out. And one of the many different things that helped me during that period, which was like a period of several years, was a book by Louise Hay
Mhm.
called You Can Heal Your Life, I believe.
Mhm.
And one of the things she said in that book that just hit me like a light bulb went on, she said that voice inside of us telling us that we're broken or that we're not good enough or that we need to be fixed. She's like, you're not born feeling that way about yourself. And I was like, whoa, because everyone talks about feeling that way. But I
Yeah.
was like, dang, she's right. We're
Yeah.
not born feeling that way. And I think I'm using that as a lead in to talk about the book that
Mm.
you have written and have now published and are sharing with the world called The Good Girl Prescription. Like we're not born this way, but there's this phenomenon, and I'd love to have you explain, just starting with the title of the book, like what does this mean? What is good girl syndrome to start with?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the reason that I decided to title the book this way and have this be the focus of all the learning that I've had over the years and what I've learned through my clients is because I saw this same common roadblocks in so many women. And it was these habits and conditioning, this programming of trying, yeah, to be good, to be a good mom, a good wife, a good friend, a good employee. And like it becomes our identity. And it starts becoming a barrier to our well-being. It starts really being one of the biggest hidden sources of stress that we are not talking about and we're not addressing. And, we're going around and we're doing all these things to try to get better, and we're not addressing these hidden patterns that are driving our stress.
Yeah.
And so, good girl syndrome is basically that set of conditioning that's very common, where we are suppressing our emotions, we're hiding our emotions, we're not even giving ourselves time to process our emotions. We're so disconnected from them because we are so externally attuned to others' needs and emotions, and we're feeling theirs and we're trying to resolve theirs and we're taking responsibility for theirs. We don't even know what ours are, and we have these internal contracts, right, that like drive us, like don't ever let somebody else feel lonely, don't ever let somebody feel uncared for. And so all of the over responsibility we start taking on comes from those contracts. And then we're taught, oh, stay aligned with your values. If you're feeling guilt, it's because you're not aligned with your values. Where our values are based on things we developed as little 2-year-old girls that said, I'm going to take responsibility for my environment in my world to make sure nobody feels alone in their emotions, right? Like I do. um,
Whoa, yeah, like I do, but
like
that
I
part's
do.
okay.
Yeah. And so that's really unrealistic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I just see that as such a driver. So I don't know the other syndromes. I mean the other characteristics. Yeah, not being able to say no, over responsibility, suppression, avoiding conflict, maintaining attachment over authenticity. Um, there's several things. I have a whole quiz on the first chapter, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, there's a question that's coming up for me, just like hearing you say all this, and it's resonating and it's making a ton of sense. Um, and I'm like, but isn't it good to be good? Like,
Right?
I mean, that's something.
Yeah.
I think that's a barrier to engaging with the work that's in the book, right? And I'm sure that that's part of the book. And I'm
Yeah.
curious what you would
Yeah.
say to that.
Yeah. So, one of the things I say is, yeah, it's good to be good, but not at the expense of being good to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like we forget ourselves on that list of people to be good to, and we start getting in a habit of chronic self-abandonment. And because we can't not be good to someone else, we get left out. We neglect ourselves. And so many of the messages that we're taught reinforce that. And so, yeah, there's a difference between loving someone and being caring about someone and choosing self-sacrifice when it makes sense to do so out of altruism, right? But so often we're doing it out of our own depletion. We don't have anything to give. We are giving and giving and giving, and we have nothing left. And so it's not coming out of overflow, it's coming out of depletion.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll. It's not sustainable.
It's not. I mean,
No.
yeah, it's absolutely not
Yeah.
not on a physical, emotional, mental, or
Yeah.
spiritual level.
And it's driven out of anxiety and fear so much of the time. What are they going to think of me if I don't?
Yes. Yes. And that is a
That's
great
not love.
segue. That's not love, that fear, right? And that's a great segue into where I wanted to go next. So, I wanted to have this conversation with you on the podcast, not just because you're my friend and I like you, although that certainly wanted to just spend some time with you chatting, but also because I think that what you're talking about in this book relates so much to the key theme of this podcast, which is called How to Trust Yourself. Um, I get the sense that what you're talking about in the book and how to trust yourself are very much, one and the same. You're talking about it through your lens. And through that lens, what are some of the specific tools, techniques, concepts that help you and also help your clients and will help readers of this book to navigate from that good girl programming to a place of self-trust where it's okay not to be like holding everyone else's feelings all the time at the expense
Yeah.
of our own.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And if I haven't already said it, I love that you're shifting into this with your podcast.
Me too.
It's funny. I was reading through something I'd written the other day when I was working on the book, and yeah, everything goes back to self-trust. But it was when I think of self-trust, I think of self-leadership too.
Mm,
And
I
so
love that.
when we are in the good girl persona, we're not in self-leadership. We're in self-preservation. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Our protective part. So
Yes.
it's our manager part. It's our like, let's keep her safe in her relationships. And that's not self-leadership. So we're not looking for the good girl to be running the show. We're looking for how do we reconnect with our internal GPS, with our spirit-led self, right? And be led by that. And when our entire systems, and maybe estrogen plays a role in this, right? We have to be able to read the world and stay safe. And so maybe, but we know
Do
programming.
you want to say a little bit more about that? Because I feel like I have a sense of what that means, but there are probably listeners who won't.
There's really biological reasons why we might need to be more attuned to danger in our environments to nurture and stay safe, to keep our body safe, to keep a child that we may be carrying safe. Like there
Yeah.
is some biological reasons, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does.
Yeah. But it's more than that. And even so, we get to a place, like I say, if we can appreciate some of this conditioning, appreciate even some of the reasons why we might have these self-preservation strategies, they're necessary to stay alive, right? But we get
Yeah.
to a point where it starts becoming sabotage and it's not doing
Right.
anybody any good anymore. It becomes driven by fear instead of love. But all that to say, you were asking about practices. Sorry, I'm getting on a tangent
Sorry,
here.
I pulled you off.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is learning how to shift our attunement inward again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I like noticing what's coming up for me, what's going on in my body right now as I see you and I'm worried about your emotional state and whether you're okay. Coming back home to ourselves. I have one of the prescriptions, one of the chapters is stay with yourself or coming back home to yourself. And how do you come back home and notice what's happening in your body? What's the energy in your body? What's going on in your body, right? And begin to attune to ourselves and learn how to go, oh my gosh, like, yeah, there's a little, like, I'm feeling a little disconnected. I'm feeling worried. Like what is happening with me?
Yeah.
and how we can start learning how to bring safety and regulation back to our bodies so that we can reconnect to our spirit-led selves and find direction and peace. And yeah, I'm trying to think. There's lots of little practices in there. A lot of it is that practice.
So basically tuning into body
Tuning into
sensation.
body sensations, and
Yeah.
then reconnecting with the emotion. And then I think the biggest one that's helped me is learning how to discern, am I in my spirit-led self, or am I in this good girl protective energy, or I'm in, like, where am I and what's happening? And if
Yeah.
I can come back home to where I feel that curiosity and that compassion and that openness and that trust and that confidence, like, oh, it's like, oh, there we are, like, oh, there she is, and
Yeah.
just being able to find myself there before I make a decision. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It really does. I
Yeah.
liked hearing you describe it. I'm thinking about like the various tells that I've come to recognize in myself for like when I'm in fear versus when I'm in love. And
Mhm.
they show up at different times in different categories. Like there are certain physical tells for me, like for the common one for me is like just a tightness in my head, neck and shoulders. Um, but it can also show up in my thinking or in my self-talk, like
Mhm.
I mean, anytime I'm noticing negative self-talk, it's like that's a tell that my nervous system's in fear and not
Yeah.
in that love place.
Yeah. And I guess some of the other little tools that I use and I've got in there too, just, like, yeah, like, how do we bring in resources to help us get back there, right? Like,
Yeah.
like things like turning on music and be like we do in our mind body group, and just letting our bodies move in freedom, and
Yeah.
and letting ourselves find back into that place where we feel safe enough to be playful and safe enough to let our guard down, and creativity, creative expression kind of things. Getting out in nature, all of that stuff that helps us to reground. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious, s- a challenge I find for myself, not just for my clients, but this comes up with clients, but it also comes up with me, even now, even being, this deep into working with mind body. I'll have these thoughts like, ugh, really? Is it really going to make a difference if I do a little dance or take a walk?
Mhm.
Because when I'm in the fear brain place, the fear will say things like, ugh,
Yeah.
that's so
Skepticism.
pointless,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Does that come up for you and for your clients? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah. I'm sure it does. And I find, I think it's more common for me. I have more skepticism towards other people, I think. But like, I think, well, so I'll just give an example. Then I have one I thought of just with a client recently too. But this week I've been preparing for a talk I have to give in front of 100 people on Saturday, the last 3 weeks.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I've been in and out of this, like ebbing and flowing in and out of this for the last 3 weeks. And there's a part of me that's really frustrated and pissed about the amount of time I have spent rewriting and redoing and overthinking and changing. And there's another part that's just more patient, like, but Kate just has to go through this process because it's just what she does to get to a place of confidence. Like, it takes a
Totally.
long time to land in that place of self-trust and knowing. But I think the beauty in that is like being okay with it, like knowing that's just gonna happen. And then getting to the place where when you do land on where you're finding yourself trusting that knowing, and just noticing how your body responds, like you were noticing earlier for yourself, like, oh yeah, this feels good and that's what I want to talk about. And like,
Yeah.
um but yeah, I think it's a constant ebb and flow. Like, I don't think we just stay in self-trust. It's just, I don't know, not human or something, I don't know.
I talk about that a lot. I repeat and reinforce that a lot with clients because, I think it's just so common to think that someone else is, learned this stuff and got it. And now it's like
We've got
smooth
mastered, and
sailing with,
yeah.
yeah, the self-trust. But it's no, it's a practice, just like meditating. You don't get to a place where now when I meditate, my mind is completely clear. It's actually the practice is just pulling ourselves back.
Right. And giving ourselves, I'm noticing when we're
Yeah.
in overthinking, oh, lovely brain, thank you so much for keeping me safe right now. You're so worried. Have you heard of I don't know. I think this would be helpful for your audience. Have you heard of a rope exercise where you like hold a rope, you hold an imaginary rope between you and like the other person? Or like for me, I did it the other day. I paused, and this is what kind of shifted me. I paused and imagined myself holding a rope between me and the audience, just
Yeah.
to notice what's my energy, what am I doing with the rope?
Oh, that's so good.
And I was like, oh, I'm holding it really tight. I'm really tense
Yeah.
and I'm wanting to pull myself into their world so I can see what's going on for them. I want to interview every one of them. So I'll make sure I know what they need and I can bring them value. Isn't that
To be
interesting?
good.
I was like, that's a lot of expectation. Like, no wonder I'm
Wow.
overthinking and changing everything over and over. Right?
I love that embodied visualization because it's we can't always connect inward by thinking what's going on for
Yeah.
me, but it's like, what's my body doing?
Yeah. And that's what is
Yeah.
really helpful for me to notice that. Because then I was like, oh, what do I want to do instead? Not that. Like, we
Right.
just play with the rope. Can I just be in the room with them? And can I let them have their experience? And let me
Yeah.
have mine. And can we just take a breath here? And like, can I just trust and teach what I know that I can teach like that and not have to go learn more about this topic or that? Like, oh my gosh. Right?
Yeah, totally. And you're getting into something that I think this audience will be really interested to hear you speak on, and I'm interested to hear you speak on, which is a lot of folks who listen to this podcast, and also myself, um, are folks who have something to say, have something to share with the world, and want to share that, whether it's in the form of any number of different kinds of creative expression or just simply whatever, the work that they do in the world is, or whether it is through writing a book. And that is a process that I'm in the very beginnings of, or, I'll say, ah, it
I
feels like
can't
I'm
read
in the
I
beginning.
can't wait to
Yeah.
read Anna's book, y'all. I know y'all are
It,
listening.
it feels like I'm in the beginning, but, really that book is being written like inside of us for
Yeah.
years. Right. So, um, as you've been in the process of creating and also making yourself visible through publishing, these tend to be activities that can trigger a lot of good girl
I don't know
impulses.
what you're talking about.
You're right. So, yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about that and how you are moving
Oh
through
my
it.
gosh. Yeah. I think I say in the intro or first step somewhere like this book has been my spiritual growth practice. Like this has
Yeah.
been me having to work through this stuff all over again at another level, right? So it's part of my healing journey. Learning how to take what we've learned and release it into the world when expression doesn't always feel safe
Yeah.
is a stretch. Yeah. And so yeah, like this has been a process to get here. Going back to what you said before that, like I think we have to give ourselves little safe spaces first to do it in a
Yeah.
way that starts making it more corrective to build
Graded
confidence.
exposure, right?
Yeah, like do first I had to express with myself,
Yeah.
right? Make that safe. Make it just between me and me, or me and God, or whatever you want to say there. But because I had a habit of always giving away my words to somebody else, I'm like, no, I got to do this for me first. And then it's like, okay, now I could like do it on a blog where I don't see the people. That's kind of safe until you like extend it into the social media and nobody reads it and you get crickets. You got to
Right.
deal with your stuff.
Oh,
But
yeah.
and that happened once, and I pulled back and didn't
Yeah.
write for 4 years.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people listening will relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we're so used to looking outside of ourselves for validation that what we're
Yeah.
doing is okay. And if we don't get the validation, we assume, well, it wasn't okay and it wasn't good. And instead of realizing people are busy and nobody's listening and nobody's reading that, or
Yeah.
maybe it's just they're listening and they don't know what to say. And we give up on ourselves because we make it mean all of the old stuff, all the old stories come up.
Totally. And I'll just like pull from my own experience because I relate to this, of course, as well. Like, I can think back on various experiences I had in my younger years before I found all these mind body tools, before the my migraine experience pulled me
Hmm.
into finding those tools. Um, there were so many different creative projects I worked on and, put out there. And then it was like that one rejection or one critical word. I had all these stories about what it meant, that I wasn't good enough, that this was the
Yeah.
wrong direction, etc. But what I didn't have was the awareness of what was really going on. What you're talking about, that my nervous system was saying, "Oh my gosh, I feel scared, and I
Yeah.
need you to comfort me."
Yeah. I didn't know any of that back then either. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. We just, yeah, we just pull back, we retreat. We
Hmm.
don't feel that way. That does not feel good. That's like stab of rejection, right? Like who
Yeah.
wants to feel that?
And we
Um,
missed that crucial message, which is, I need you to comfort me.
yeah, like I just never understood that those familiar things that I felt over and over again that kept happening, that was a younger part of me that experienced the sting of that when I was little, like, and that it's
Yeah.
just a protective mechanism to keep me away from feeling that. Just it's just shifted everything to know that. Like it changes the way you're able to support yourself and step into that self-leadership, right?
Yeah.
But as far as like now in this book process, yeah, I think the biggest thing that I had to work through was, so one of the things with good girls is we like self-sufficiency. We don't like to put ourselves into a position to feel vulnerable and feel what we just talked about, right? And
Yeah.
so we get really good at being independent and taking care of ourselves and being the caretaker to everybody else and all of that stuff. And so um, when I chose to invest in this program as a hybrid publishing program, it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to shift my focus away from marketing my business. I needed to be able to be pretty single focused. I was still having clients and letting them come in organically, but I just wasn't focused on the business. So first of all, my entire savings account, and I used a credit card, like it was
Yeah.
a lot, right?
Yeah.
But everything in me was like 100% yes. I didn't even overthink it. I knew I was ready and it needed to happen. Um,
Thank you, by the way, for describing the money part of it too,
yeah,
because like that's a big part of our emotional experience and our safety system and all that. And it's one that we're kind of taught not to talk about
yeah.
too,
And
which
one of the
brings more
biggest stressors,
fear.
right? And
Yeah,
so again,
totally.
if you're used to not burdening anybody else, okay, and being self-sufficient and not wanting to, so imagine me in this place where I'm already in this place of a little bit of stress because I've got to figure out how to pay off that credit card and I'm
Yeah.
not bringing in as much money. And so now I'm having to shift into trust and allowing my husband to support me.
Yeah.
And it's not that, and he's totally okay with that. We just have to budget things, right? Like he was okay with that, but my insides were not okay with that. Like my
Yeah.
insides were not okay with that. And anytime I heard him say, "Hey, can you come in here and tell me what like we need to talk through the expenses." He's just trying to be
Yes.
practical, and I'm just feeling just guilt, just like
Yeah.
and then I hear my daughter be like, asking for something, or why don't we have money? Like here she is down to one child and two are gone. We used to pay for private school. She's like, why don't we have any money? And I'm like, well, because mom's not making money like she used to, and so just so much of that guilt would just start eating me alive, and then my inner critic would just start going to town. And I mean, talk about internal war. It was fierce sometimes.
And I
Um,
see like what your body is doing as you're expressing it, which
yeah,
it's what our bodies do, right? It's like we clamp down and we get
yeah,
really
like Kate, how
tight with ourselves.
selfish, how self-absorbed. Look what you're doing to your
Yeah.
family. Look at the stress you're putting your husband under. Look at what you're, like just
Oh,
yeah, it was this
whereas,
shame attack. Yeah.
and I'll just like, because I'm listening and I'm like relating, and I'm sure so many people are relating, and I'm stepping back to think, yeah, and you named how and you paid for all this private school, and that wasn't a problem, right? It's like it's when it's for me, it's when it's valuing
Exactly.
me. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I was all my money would go to, my kids' sports and their private school and all of those things. And so
Yeah.
redirecting it towards myself and building a business was,
Yes. It's not this, in other words, like it's not the spending. I mean, spending money can bring up stress, sure, but that's not the highlight that I'm getting is that it was not necessarily about the spending. It was about taking up space, really.
yeah, like it's a scarcity mindset. Like if I take it up for me, I'm taking it away from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. And my internal contract is like, that's not okay. And so it really becomes a really toxic internal environment when that's happening. Lots of anxiety.
So,
And then the
yeah.
anxiety starts driving you to do something. Don't, I almost like shut down my business. Like, how dare you invite other women into this?
Wow.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
So, hearing that, which again, it's like the fear, the guilt, and the self-harshness are so relatable. And I know so many listeners will hear themselves in that.
Mhm.
And I'm so hungry for all of us, listeners and myself, to hear from you how you moved through it. When we hear from each other how we move through these things, it's like our nervous systems get to grow and form new neural pathways because
Mhm.
we're hearing how things can shift and move differently.
Yeah. So I'm getting a little PTSD thinking about it. I think
Yeah.
the one time I remember, I'll tell you two different ways that I handled it. The one time that it happened really fiercely, I was actually sitting in my daughter's choir concert in a church, her school choir concert. So I couldn't get away. I couldn't do my normal like retreat and go cry in my bed or scream. I was like stuck sitting there.
Yeah.
And something my husband had said about like not having, I was trying to use this space to communicate with him, thinking I need to bring him into what's happening with me so he can co-regulate with me and support me, right?
Yeah.
Trying to move beyond my old patterns, right? Well, it wasn't a corrective experience because his practicality said, yeah, it's gonna be bad. Christmas is around the corner. And I'm
Boy.
like, right?
Oh,
And so
exactly
my
the opposite
body's
of what you
sitting there
needed.
just like, so I start trying to use my tools. I start looking at the organ pipes and at the windows and trying to orient to cues of safety and
Yes.
just trying to breathe through it and ground myself. And I couldn't really hear the girls singing or any of that, but I just started doing all the orienting work that we've learned to do and waiting and letting that anxiety and that energy just move through me until I felt my body settle. And then I came home and the next day, this is what I do a lot. I do a lot of journaling, and I'm pulling up my emotion wheel and I'm coming back to the body and I'm going back and forth until I can work myself through it to find out what was the trigger, what was I feeling, oh, it was inadequacy there. Yeah, that was happening. And, like just really naming it and noticing and then ministering to myself and bringing truth into that and love into that and compassion into that. And, so lots of that through this whole process. And so it's no wonder I haven't had a lot of productive work coming in because I do feel like those hours spent doing that are one of the most productive things I can do. Otherwise, I'm just dragging this crap forward over and over again.
Totally. And then when we drag that crap forward, that's what we have to offer people too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm trying to remind myself that every time that's happening, I'm getting to grow in a better understanding of myself and better understanding of my clients when they're having those experiences. And so instead of seeing it as failure, seeing it as unproductive use of my time, or it's like, no, I'm getting to learn.
I relate so closely to everything you just said. And I want to kind of summarize for the listeners what I heard you describe as your process, which also I related to very well. So here's how I understood it, and you can tell me if if this feels right or not. But what I heard was step one, recognize that fear is present
Mhm.
and that fear is not necessarily a mandate for action and it's not necessarily a fact, but simply fear is present.
Mhm.
Um, then I heard step two, recognizing that fear is present, that's a cue to then orient to cues of safety. Okay, my nervous system's in fear. My next step is to bring my nervous system back into safety. So I'm going to orient to cues of safety, like looking at something that's grounding, connecting to the present moment. Step three, once the nervous system has settled enough
Mhm.
to do some deeper inquiry, step three was the journaling it out,
Mhm.
connecting to like understanding what was going on, learning from it. And then that brings you to step four is actually connecting with that clarity, that inner guidance, like what is actually true for me in this moment where my nervous system feels safe enough to see my own clarity and not just these fear signals.
Yeah. When you shared that, the other two pieces that came out at the end, like, so then I'm going to go back and I'm going to have another conversation with my husband, because if he better understands what happened with me and what I needed differently or what I could have asked for differently, then we don't keep having the same experiences over and over again. And I'm not seeing him as the threat and the monster, right? That doesn't know how to show
Right.
the compassion I need. Like, I have to learn to give that to myself and teach him what I need. And then the other piece of that, I think that I've learned to do is, yeah, when I recognize that fear, that anxiety, that activation energy, and there's a part of me going, do something different, go do something, like it's trying to mobilize me to get away from the threat. And I pause in that moment and I don't act from that place anymore. Because
Yeah.
in the past, if you look at like all my like moves and selling my house and changing jobs, and so much was done to
Yeah.
get away from that.
Yeah.
So learning how to let
Yeah.
it settle and get back into that place like you just described, where we have clarity, and then we can step into that self-leadership that we were talking
Uh,
about. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I really connect to that too. Like learning how to tell, how to tell the difference between impulsivity and passion,
Mhm.
and B, how to move ourselves into the place where we, like what you were saying, like pausing to connect to safety.
Mhm.
Because when we're in fear, we do move impulsively. But if we can pause, recognize that we're in fear, bring ourselves back into safety. I love that you talked about how there was an action you wanted to take afterward. You did
Mhm.
have another conversation with your husband, but it was not the reactive, fear-driven action.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I think there's like a misunderstanding that a lot of folks have that if we settle, that means then we're just going to go into passive mode. No, we
Right.
can take
Yeah. It's not about calming and passivity, is it?
intentional,
No, no, no.
intentional
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. I have a chapter where I talk about healthy aggression, where it's understanding the activation and what was behind it, but shifting out of defensiveness and learning how to channel it in a constructive way. And
Yeah.
I do think sometimes we get caught up in anger expression and we never get to that place of what's the request. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I need you to
Yes.
communicate this better. I need you to, like, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think in my mind, as the good girl, we know suppressing and we know exploding and reacting
right. What are you
versus
talking about? Never.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think that's where we get so frustrated, because I hear a lot of clients, they're like, I've tried to communicate it, and they keep having the same experience over and over again because they're communicating it from the defensiveness. And
Yeah.
that's just triggering the other defensiveness. And it just proves the story over and over again. And I'm not going to be understood. I'm not going to be heard. So why try?
I wonder if there is like a client story you might be able to tell without,
Um, I think, well, the one I thought of a little bit ago that I think probably relates to this too, and I won't say who it is, but we were talking about skepticism. And so I have some clients that are a little bit more headier than me,
Yeah.
very disconnected from the body. And so skepticism is very strong, very analytical, very in so one of the things we'll do is we'll start with the skepticism, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's the entry point. But along the lines of the not being able to express yourself or feel safe enough to let somebody see into your heart of what you're feeling and communicate from a place of trusting that you're going to be understood and heard. Right. So I was, this client has been struggling with uh, physical stuff for a long time, been to every doctor, tried the supplements, tried the functional medicine route, tried everything. And, goes to physical therapy, frozen shoulder, all of these things. And worked with her a while back. And then she just came back recently because it's just like her cortisol levels were just, off the
Through the roof.
charts. And she's like, I know the emotional load component is huge here. I know the way that I'm showing up at work with no boundaries and the way that I'm showing, she has a special needs daughter. So just all of this is, she knows is a big piece of it. So we start working on this again. And one of the things that we were working on recently is this communication piece and this being able to express yourself and be heard and understood and feeling safe enough to do that. Because that one of the reasons that she started working again is because her anger had gotten so volatile that she was afraid she was going to hurt her daughter.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was because it was a hold it in, don't say anything, don't do anything. And then, right? Like you just
Yeah.
have nothing left. You have no capacity.
Yeah.
And when you're not able to communicate from a place of open-heartedness and trusting the other person's going to hear you, you start carrying all the load of everything. You don't know how to ask for what you need. You assume and you don't trust them and you don't think they're going to be able to meet you in your need. And so you take on and you take on and you take on. This is what she's doing. And she, every time I see her, she's like this, right? Because she's taking
Holding your
everything
neck.
on and holding
Yeah.
everything herself. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's learning how to recognize I'm holding it all in because I don't trust you with my heart. I don't trust
Mm.
I'm going to be met in this. Don't trust I'm going to be supported. And so it's so important for us them to learn how to create corrective communicative experiences. Does that make sense?
Yes. And did
Yeah.
that happen with this
So
person?
it's happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're starting to feel some emotion. We're starting to,
And
you
how,
know,
briefly, how does that happen and what starts to change in a person's life?
I, I want to share this question with the audience because I think this created a big shift. I'm reading the book right now by Glennon Doyle, Untamed. Have you
Yeah.
read that? And one of the questions she asks, I love this because I use a lot of visualization with my clients, like helping them dream and picture what they want instead and start to
Yeah.
step into that experience and those beliefs, right? But she shifted her question a little differently and she said, what is the most truest, most beautiful, um, marital relationship or partner you can imagine? Like what would that look like? The truest, most beautiful. And so she just wrote down the vision of that. And even in that, it was like, yeah, there'd be just this, I'd feel I'd be able to open up and trust that you're going to hear me and understand me. And we'd be sharing and communicating and carrying this together. And and she could see in that how that's going to be supportive for them too. That's exactly what they want too. They're both
Yeah.
alone in their isolation, right? And so just starting with the vision, starting with the felt sense, starting with what that feels like in the body. What would I be doing differently if I was believing that? What's the first step I would take, right? And I think that's where the shifts start happening. Like in respecting the skeptic, respecting the part that feels really fearful about that or doesn't feel like they have the bandwidth for it, or and just like what if we just took the letter that you just wrote and let them read it?
Yeah.
This is where I am. Is this what you want too? I want to, like, I don't like just finding that first little baby step.
What I was experiencing as I was listening to this and, just recalling all kinds of
Mhm.
different conversations I've had with my own partner, my husband, that have, gone in different directions depending on how we stepped into those conversations.
Mhm.
And as I was listening to you, I was like, oh, my nervous system, my body, my spirit is just feeling so safe and good and like loving and alive as I'm envisioning, bringing that positive vision in. And then when I feel that way, I communicate in a way that feels really safe and good to my partner, and then he feels safe, and then he
Yeah.
responds in that way, right? But when I come in expecting the enemy attack,
Yeah.
I speak in a way that feels very threatening, and then, we all know the
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
results that come from that.
No. And I will say one way that that's been helpful. So we didn't start out focusing with the daughter that was a really volatile, like a source of stress, or with that relationship. We started working on it in a little bit safer context, which was our work environment where the same patterns were
Yeah.
showing up. And then she was
Yeah.
able to translate that difference into, oh, if I applied that over
Yeah.
here, oh, now I see. Like, and so you can start where it's a little safer. Does that make
Totally.
sense?
It totally does. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I love to use the language that you and I know from the chronic pain recovery world in relationships, in work, in like bringing creative work forward into the world. This idea of graded exposure, like start with this step that feels safe enough, because that's
Mhm.
how we build safety.
Yeah.
And then we can amplify safety and um, spread it out to that next layer that
Yeah.
we approach.
Mhm.
Amazing. So we are coming soon to the conclusion of this hour. And so I've got my three final questions for you.
Okay.
The first of which is, what is the soapbox message that you are passionate about spreading through this work you're doing?
Mm. I think it kind of plays into what we were just talking about and describing, is that healing is deeper than the physical, that we've got to look below the surface. We've got to recognize the habits and the patterns and the conditioning and the programming that drives our responses and our physiology. And even going beyond like things like chronic pain and things, it drives our ability to either move forward in our life towards our goals or stay stuck. And I think so many times we're yeah, we're just looking on the surface, and we get so frustrated. And I think, to go back to my soapbox message, is that too many women are getting sick, staying sick. Too many women are dying before they ever become grandmothers. Too many women are staying in places of chronic stress when we have answers and we're not releasing them to the world enough because of our own fear of expression.
Ooh, oh my gosh, I got such a chill when you said that. Such a chill.
Yeah.
Oof, that's
That's why I had to write this book, because I
it
couldn't stay silent anymore. It's too important.
is too important. And the message that we all have, we've all got a message, and it is important because when we stifle ourselves, we amplify that stifling
Yeah.
that is collective. And when we step out and we take a chance on opening our hearts, we open up that space for everyone around us to step into. And it's so
Yeah.
important.
Mm.
And I thank you for doing that by
Yeah.
bringing this book
It's
into the
scary
world.
work, isn't it? It is a
It
little
really is.
scary. The question I always ask myself and I ask my clients is, what is the direction of courage? You're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel fear, but we can know we're going in the direction of growth. Yeah. So,
I love you, Kate.
me
This conversation is medicine to me.
too. Thank you.
Um, for folks who are listening who are feeling like this conversation has some medicine in it for them as well, and they're feeling overwhelmed, confused, scared, not knowing what is the first step that they can take, what words of encouragement would you give to that person?
I guess I would just start with telling them they're human and we get it. And just start there. Like, appreciate your design as a human, appreciate what you're experiencing, what you're feeling is all normal. And where you are today is perfect, and just embrace that and just see if you can find some appreciation for the way you're reacting or responding, whether you're shutting down numb or you're have complete skepticism. Like, just appreciate what's happening and why your system might be doing that. What's it doing for you, right? What might it be protecting? What might it be preserving? I think that's where we have to start.
I think that's such a beautiful and necessary message for all of us, wherever we are in our life path, because we're always beginning each new moment in that moment. And these waves of fear are going to meet us and greet us at every point along the way. And that's such a beautiful message to be met with.
I think that's what we all need too, right? Like that brings in the connection that gives us the courage to take a step. Yeah.
For listeners who want to learn more about you and your work, who want to read your book, who want to connect with you, who want to work with you, where can people find you? And how can they reach out? What can they reach out for?
Yeah. So my website is just katebartley.com. Pretty easy. My Instagram is Kate Bartley Coaching. I think Facebook is also just Kate Bartley. So they can find me. I think actually a little bit more on Facebook just because I don't know, my people are there, even though the algorithms suck. And I do send out newsletters, and so if you go to my website, you can find how to get on the newsletter. My book, actually, I've created a sneak peek so you can download and get free access to the introduction that'll give you a feel for it. And so I'm going to give Anna that link to that so you can grab that. I think that actually might get you on my newsletter, and then you can opt out if you don't want to. But yeah. So, and they should be ready for pre-order. I don't know when this podcast is going to be released, but probably mid-March it'll be ready for pre-order, and then publication probably end of April. So
fantastic. Well, this podcast episode will come out probably in April, I'm thinking, but the book will be ready for pre-order by that
I will
time.
say the cool thing, I'm also got a launch team. If you're really passionate about this message, jump on board and let's get these voices heard. I've got lots of stories of women in this book too. And so would love you, if you're looking for a way to be involved and use your voice, come join my team. I would love it.
Amazing. How do they do that?
So if they grab that intro to the book and they're resonating with the message and they get on my newsletter, they're going to see launch team stuff on there.
Fantastic.
As well as if you pre-order, you're going to get access to a lot of bonus and behind the scenes stuff that you won't get access to if you wait till publication. So
amazing. And yes, I will have all those links that Kate mentioned in the show notes so you can find them easily and get into her world and her book. Kate, I'm so glad that we know each other. I'm really grateful for this friendship, and I'm really grateful for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Me too. Loved it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing, and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.